I spent the majority of my early childhood and schooling in secular schools. We had a very strong public school system in the area that I grew up in. And so I got to see some of what that was like. I went to college at a secular university, my dad's alma mater in California. And yet maintaining that Christian background, I also I then wanted to kind of pursue a more fuller, a more full marriage of the kind of the sciences that I enjoyed with the Christian belief that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got my PhD at Boston University in molecular and cell biology and biochemistry. But I began to see kind of a persistent theme in kind of Christian communities of like this fear and apprehension and nervousness almost about science. Like, here's this thing that we don't fully understand, and so maybe it's better not to talk about it.
Yeah.
And that saddened me. It really did. And so what I wanted to do, and what I kind of then, the trajectory I took from there was, I think that Christians are ideally situated and suited and capable of doing science in its most complete and fullest sense, because of our Christian faith, not in spite of it. And I think Christians should be really excited about doing science and the things we do. And so I went to Westminster, and I took a variety of classes there, the Ventilian, classes in Christian apologetics and philosophy. In terms of the arguments from science, right? So part of the new atheist movement, what made it new, was this reliance on some of the new information that's we are discovering as a result of the advances in biology and chemistry and science as a whole. And Dawkins draws on his background as an evolutionary biologist. And so a lot of it is what he would say are evidences for Darwinian evolution, and the idea that because evolution is true, we have a better explanation for the diversity on Earth than Christians and special creation or anything like that. And there's been lots and lots and lots of ink spilled over these particular things. And there are still many open questions too about, God, in the Bible, God clearly tells us that he created the world. But he doesn't necessarily give us a step-by-step account of, first I made this animal, and then I made this little tweak to the genes, and I made this animal. Like, that's not the point and purpose. And I don't want to get into what I would consider intra-Christian debates over particular aspects. And I don't spend a lot of time on that in the book. The main thing I focus on in the book is, I think, the failure of a purely materialistic evolutionary description to adequately provide for a lot of what we see. And unfortunately, a lot of the examples that Dawkins gives he has a whole book on this called The Greatest Show on Earth, which is his, biological proof for evolution. But all of those proofs fall into the category of what we would consider microevolution, which is fairly small changes that are adaptive, and which we can all look. I mean, we look around at the human race; like, each individual is unique and different.
Sure,
but we're all still humans, and so those are the examples fall into that category. And I spend a great deal of time in the book, I think, talking about what I think are some of the limits of mutation and natural selection, and why they're limited, and how, particularly, when I think the powerful things about the way Dawkins uses Darwinian evolution and purely materialistic evolutionary theory is that he paints these really great pictures. They're really good stories, and they make sense in terms of our imaginative capabilities. And The problem is that I think those stories kind of brush over details in the stories that are problematic, and where the details don't work out the way he says it does. When you get down to the nitty gritty of what would actually have to happen for this to happen, is that possible?
I find this is a whole kind of cottage industry about this evolutionary biology and, human origin. Yeah. And where, I listen to, a lot of different podcasts and whatnot, and even stuff on hunting and conservation and naturalism. They're talking about, origin of various species, or how this mountain got there, or something like that. But even when we're speaking about biology, there's always this tendency, well, we evolved as a species beyond ape to have these abilities, and it's always kind of neat and tidy, where they just say, where these evolutionary biologists will say, well, and this is how it evolved. Where it's just they've constructed a story or a narrative to describe how a certain characteristic or trait might have come to be, and why that would have been advantageous in terms of the propagation of the species. Why would somebody believe in God? Well, that might provide, some sort of confidence or fear or something like that, where they could, meet the challenges of their day, and it would maybe lower their stress hormones, and they would be able to cope with various difficult and whatever. They construct the narrative, but once the narrative's in place, then you start hearing it around the culture, and somebody said, well, this mechanism of human being is here because of X or Y or Z, but it's storytelling. This isn't reproduced. It's treated and passed off as a scientific finding, where by definition it can't be tested. In a way, it's supra. It transcends the scientific method. Yet it's passed off as being kind of a scientific inference, and it ends up in some ways, in some quarters, kind of becoming canonical.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's really interesting to me, especially as you start thinking about presuppositions and worldviews that we all bring to the table.
Plausibility and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stories are appealing.
Oh, yeah.
Stories are gripping.
That's because we evolved as a species to need stories, Ransom.
But then the question you have to ask is, just because a story is appealing doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
Right. And we examine this as Christians too. We have the Christian story is a beautiful, beautiful story. But we also believe it's true because we've examined it, and there's there's an innumerable number of reasons to believe that it's true. Whereas other stories that are out there, if you start to kind of push on them a little bit, really push, are they really true, or is the story just a comforting story? And you can ask that of someone who's an atheist as well. Like, why are you so attached to this story? Because giving it up means that you're giving up more than a story. You're giving up a worldview. And in that case, I get it. Like,
sure.
I mean, it's not, evolutionary theory is not just kind of a scientific thing. For many of these people, it's their rationality. Sure. It's their excuse for why we don't have to believe in God, or we don't have to consider God. Right. And so there's much more, there's heart stuff that's attached to materialism and atheism, and the materialism in the evolutionary story, which means that people are way more, they're way more attached to it than they might be. We,
start to realize, well, maybe the evolutionary view of the world is not the truth. Then that means a lot of different things for how I'm supposed to live, and it changes a lot. There are consequences, and so maintaining a certain worldview, there's certainly a vested interest in it, we should say.